Welcome back to the Pop Culture Discussion. I am your host Robert, and with Deadpool and Wolverine coming out very soon and easily looking to be the most violent movie within the MCU, it's got me looking back at all the other not so family friendly sequences with the most violent scenes within the movies of the MCU. That's right, I said the movies, not the TV series, because let's be honest, if I included the TV shows, Daredevil, The Punisher, and Jessica Jones would take up this entire list all by themselves with all the brutal and bloody kills in those shows. Could that be a video for another time? Absolutely. Although making it without getting flagged or demonetized, I'm not entirely sure how I'd pull that off. But either way, today I'm purely focusing on the MCU movies. Although the MCU is generally aimed at all demographics and especially younger audiences, with most of the projects only getting a PG-13 or M rating over here in Australia, some brutally violent sequences definitely seem to slip through the cracks with the help of quick editing, the lack of blood, or sneaky camera angles. With a surprisingly large list of brutal sequences to choose from, I was easily able to create a list of the top 30 most violent scenes within the movies of the MCU. This is a big list, so let's power through it so this video doesn't go on forever like phase 4 of the MCU. Shrinking down to size with number 30, Ant-Man defeats Yellowjacket in Ant-Man. When Ant-Man goes subatomic to shrink down to defeat Yellowjacket, he does this by smashing through and destroying Yellowjacket's suit. When Ant-Man hits the main core of Yellowjacket's suit, the shrinking mechanism malfunctions as it shrinks and pulls Yellowjacket's arms inwards as he is helpless to feel his body fold in on itself. The flashy shrinking effects and lack of blood can make this a little less violent than it could have been, but Darren's scream and the feeling of hopelessness still adds to the brutality of this sequence. How this movie only got a PG rating with a villain defeat like this is honestly pretty wild. Looking over at number 29, Loki copies the Doctor's eye in The Avengers. Back when Loki was an evil supervillain and not the anti-hero we all know and love today, he cruised on up behind a doctor who I assume was at some kind of charity event, threw him on a table and proceeded to violently drill out and copy the man's eye. Although the scene is mostly implied due to the sneaky camera angles and the sound effects of the grinding, the smile on Loki's face is more than enough to present the shocking violence on display, plus the fact that that poor doctor seems to be alive for this entire procedure. Chopping in at number 28, Loki takes Thor's hand in Thor: The Dark World. When Loki stabs Thor and pushes him down a cliff, Thor attempts to call Mjolnir for help by raising his hand, only for Loki to chop that hand clean off. The sudden and shocking chop from Loki and the revealing flesh and bone on Thor's arm definitely crafts some impacting violence in this scene. The lack of blood and magic reveal showing it was all a trick from Loki was definitely a relief for fans of Thor. Swimming into number 27, Zemo tortures a Hydra agent in Captain America: Civil War. Although there is no blood or weapons used in the scene, the brutal nature of this form of torture definitely crafts a shocking build-up to put this scene on the list. And for people with a fear of drowning, this scene can definitely be hard to watch, especially the final twitch from the Hydra agent as the water engulfs him. Snapping over to number 26, Scarlet Witch escapes the mirror dimension in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Again, even though there is a lack of blood in this scene, it still doesn't pull it away from the brutality of the bone-crunching sequence. With the Scarlet Witch climbing through a reflective gong to get out of the mirror dimension, she unnaturally twists and snaps her body to get out, presenting a short but sweet sequence pulled straight out of a horror film. The sound design here absolutely adds to the creepiness and violent nature of this scene as well. Flopping over to number 25, the Hulk kicks Blonsky in The Incredible Hulk. On the subject of snapping bones, when Emil Blonsky gets overconfident and decides to talk down to the Hulk at point blank range, the Hulk responds by kicking him straight in the chest. Although the camera initially cuts away from the kick as it makes contact, we are then shown a ragdoll Blonsky slammed straight into a tree as his unfocused face is shown to be heavily injured as well. It's really the ragdoll physics and the sound effects of the tree impact that adds to the brutality and the violence for this scene. Chopping in at number 24, Captain America chops off an arm in The Avengers. When Captain America proves why he's the one giving orders to a couple of police officers by taking out Fort Chitauri, he does so by slamming his shield down so hard on the final alien, he actually chops its arm off. Not only does the arm just casually flop out of the Chitauri weapon, now in Steve's possession, but we also get a few drops of black blood dripping out afterwards. This scene is shown and shot extremely fast though, so audiences would be forgiven for not picking up on this level of brutality on display. Rampaging onto number 23, the Winter Soldier's landing strip rampage in Captain America and the Winter Soldier. When a team of SHIELD agent pilots attempt to support Captain America, they are interrupted by a rampaging Winter Soldier, who proceeds to slaughter them all by blowing them up with a grenade launcher, shooting one of them in the throat, blowing up more with a grenade, one punching someone, then most brutal of all, kicking one of them into a jet engine. And then to top that all off, he point blank executes the final survivor with 2 shots to their head. This is easily one of the most brutally realistic one-sided fights in the MCU. It's honestly just the lack of blood that pulls this short from its full shock value. Punching in at number 22, the Winter Soldier repetitively beats Captain America in Captain America and the Winter Soldier. When Steve Rogers tries to break through to his best friend's Bucky Barnes' brainwashing, by refusing to fight him, the Winter Soldier side of Bucky continues to take control and deliver the smackdown on Captain America. Not only is Bucky repetitively hitting Steve directly in the face with a metal arm, but he beats him within an inch of his life. The brutal punches leave Steve with a swollen eye and cuts all over his face. Luckily, a combination of a callback quote and some fallen debris are enough to stop the punches coming and keep Cap alive to fight another day. Flying across to number 21, Yondu versus his entire ex-crew in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Although the upbeat music, laughing reactions from the heroes, and exaggerated acting from the villains do make this sequence quite fun to witness, the complete mass murdering on display with this scene is still extremely brutal, especially when the kills are slowing down with bone-crunching sound effects, alien blood, and character screams. The extremely fast movement speed of the arrow does skip past a lot of the impacts of the actual kills, but nonetheless, this is still a violently massive body count for such a short scene. Blowing up into number 20, Tony Stark's convoy is attacked in Iron Man. The brutally realistic warfare on display with this scene not only shows American soldiers getting immediately slaughtered without even being able to put up a decent fight, but the intense sound design and shaky camera work also add to the stress of this situation. The most violent part in the scene, however, is saved for the very end, when Tony Stark himself is blown up by one of his own bombs and suddenly begins to bleed from his chest as the seriousness of his injuries kick in. If it wasn't for his high-tech body armor vest, this would have been the end of Tony Stark. Smashing down to number 19, Ronan executes a Xandarian in Guardians of the Galaxy. Ronan the Accuser knows how to make one hell of an intimidating entrance as he executes a captive Xandarian by crushing his skull with his giant hammer after monologuing his brutal dialogue for the build-up. Although this scene cuts right before the impact of the strike, the sound design and the amount of blood used immediately afterwards is more than enough evidence to prove the brutality of the death. Slicing through to number 18, Captain Carter is cut in half in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. After the Scarlet Witch slaughters her way through multiple members of the Illuminati, more on that coming right up, Captain Carter puts up a surprisingly longer fight than expected. Unfortunately, Carter makes the mistake of throwing her shield straight at Wanda, who just casually catches it and with her powers throws it straight back at a much faster velocity. Wanda throws it so fast, in fact, that it slices Peggy straight in half. Now the cheeky zoom in on Carter's shocked face instead of showing the impact itself definitely hides some of the brutality of this kill, but it's the blood all over the shield in the next shot that keeps this death shockingly violent. Super speeding into number 17, Quicksilver's sacrifice in Avengers Age of Ultron. As Ultron is firing down on the Avengers with a jet-powered minigun, the bullets attempt to reach Hawkeye as he protects a child and prepares for the worst. Luckily, Quicksilver is fast enough to run in at the last second and move Hawkeye and the child to safety. Unfortunately, in doing so, the minigun bullets rip straight through Quicksilver, leaving him with bloody bullet holes all over his body as he falls to his death. Yes, the impact of the bullets isn't seen, but it's the bloody aftermath of Quicksilver's body that is the true violence on display here. Jump scaring over to number 16, Charles Xavier gets snapped in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness when Professor X attempts to save Wanda from the Scarlet Witch within her mind. He is almost successful in pulling her free until the Scarlet Witch emerges from behind him within a cloud of red smoke and immediately breaks his neck. The extremely fast attack of this kill does slightly soften the blow, but absolutely nothing is implied as we are shown the snap in full detail. The realistic sound design and the dead Xavier looking directly at the camera afterwards also add to the impact of the brutal nature of this kill. Not to mention, this is also our first proper look at the truly terrifying design of the Scarlet Witch. Exploding onto number 15, Shang-Chi versus the Dweller of Darkness in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. After an extended battle sequence, Shang-Chi is finally given an opening to launch the magical 10 rings of power down the throat of the Dweller of Darkness dragon. Shang-Chi then proceeds to control the rings from a distance as he pushes down and begins to spin as the rings drill into the chest of the dragon. Once the rings are deep enough into the dragon's stomach, Shang-Chi does one final move to explode the rings out of the dragon, by doing so exploding the dragon as well. At first, we just see a magical explosion, which seems genuinely pretty harmless, but it is instantly followed up by the remaining blood and body parts of the dragon flying everywhere. If this wasn't a mythical creature, this scene could have been very upsetting for animal lovers. Laser blasting through to number 14, Iron Man vs. Seven in Iron Man 3. When Iron Man is held down and quickly has to deal with an enemy he knows is mostly indestructible to basic attacks, Tony thinks quick and blasts a savagely large laser shot straight from his chest directly through Seven's. Not only does he leave a massive hole straight through where Seven's chest used to be, but his cold one-liner straight afterwards also adds to the shock value of this shot. Slicing across to number 13, Thor loses his eye to Hela in Thor Ragnarok. With Thor and Hela finally getting an equal rematch, Thor holds his ground for the opening of the fight until Hela disarms him, slices his stomach, and then swings her sword directly at his face and cuts out his right eye. From the way Thor is facing, the initial slice isn't seen and only heard, but the second Thor turns around from the hit, we see just a bloody mess where his right eye used to be. Thor never truly heals from this strike in future movies, so this is easily one of the most brutal hits he has ever taken. Shocking us all with number 12, the Winter Soldier murders Tony Stark's parents in Captain America Civil War. When the Winter Soldier suddenly crashes the Stark's car into a tree, Howard tries to crawl to safety only to be picked up by the hair by Barnes and brutally punched twice in the face, instantly killing him. Maria, still trapped in the car, is then choked to death by Barnes as he just stands there with a blank look on his face, clearly unaware that he is killing his old friends. The quick editing between the actual scene, the recorded footage, and Tony's reaction to this sequence is the only thing pulling this scene back from the full violence on display. If this scene was shown normally and in its entirety with no cuts, it definitely could have been a lot more upsetting. Ripping off to number 11, Adam Warlock versus the War Pig in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. When War Pig charges at Adam Warlock with her jetpack, because this attack literally worked moments earlier on Gamora, her plan completely backfires as Adam's super strength casually catches her head and he snaps it clean off her body. War Pig's lifeless body then drops to the floor as Adam holds her head as he clearly didn't want to kill her, she was just an inconvenience to him. The complete lack of any blood definitely makes this kill less violent, but the pure brutality of a stronger character casually snapping and ripping off another character's head is pretty shocking. Stabbing into number 10, the Hulk stabs the Abomination in the Incredible Hulk. The over 10-minute fight between the Hulk and the Abomination is extremely brutal, but the most savage part from the whole brawl is definitely when the Hulk starts choking out the Abomination with a chain, and as the Abomination punches up behind him, smacking the Hulk directly in the face, Hulk responds by ripping out the Abomination's right elbow and stabbing him in the chest with it. Not only does this make the Abomination bleed, so we know he absolutely took some damage, but he also screams out in pain. The Abomination is then choked out by the Hulk, but we all know that that elbow stab was the most painful part for him. Snapping over to number 9, Thanos kills Loki in Avengers Infinity War. When Loki tries to trick Thanos into lowering his guard so Loki can strike a deadly blow, Thanos holds him at bay with an Infinity Stone and then proceeds to pick him up by the throat as he slowly but viciously strangles him. Loki violently flaps around as he struggles to breathe, and the blood vessels in his eyes begin to pop as the life leaves his body. Thanos then delivers the final blow as he just casually snaps Loki's neck with a smile on his face. This is easily one of the most brutal main character deaths in the MCU. It's completely dragged out and shown in full detail. Falling into number 8, Caecilius kills the Librarian in Doctor Strange. When the Librarian is restrained by magical brands by the followers of Caecilius in the Sorcerer's Library, Caecilius makes his entrance without even a single word, but instead just by kneeling in front of the Librarian and decapitating him with 2 axes and 1 swift movement. The decapitation itself is shown through a shadow, but the shadow is in full view, and with the sudden slam of the head into a bucket, this is still an insanely brutal way to go out, especially considering this is literally the opening minutes of this movie, so we have absolutely no context or build up for this at all, adding to the shock value of this entire sequence. Crushing in at number 7, Hulk crushes a Chitauri in the Avengers. Just before the nuke is shot at the Chitauri invasion, the Hulk lands the smackdown on 2 Chitauri and then proceeds to kick one right in front of him. Hulk is then attacked from the side by another Chitauri, but grabs this one by the head without even looking. Hulk then crushes that Chitauri's head in his right hand as black blood explodes from the Hulk's hand and yeets that headless Chitauri out of frame. This is an insanely brutal way to go out, and the only reason this amount of graphic detail is allowed is because it's super quick, it's an alien, and it's black blood. If Hulk did this to a human being with red blood, it would be one of the most graphic deaths he has ever delivered. Going for the head at number 6, Thor kills Thanos in Avengers Endgame. When Thanos is interrogated by the Avengers about the whereabouts of the Infinity Stones, and Thanos reveals they no longer exist because he destroyed them, Thor takes the opportunity to immediately decapitate Thanos as he is no longer needed. This death is extremely shocking as Thanos is still talking and the chop is shown in full detail as Thor just goes straight for it with 1 hit. Although we get minimal blood spray from Thanos' neck, Nebula still gets a squirt of her father's blood on her face. After Thanos wiped out half the universe in the previous Avengers movie, this death is extremely satisfying, even if it's brutally graphic for the children watching. Bleeding over to number 5, Team Thor versus Zeus's guards in Thor Love and Thunder. Despite the super stylized nature of this fight, when Team Thor come up against the guards of Zeus, they absolutely shred through them, spilling their blood all over the arena. The only thing keeping this extremely bloody fight family friendly is that all of the guards bleed gold instead of red. But imagine if it wasn't gold. Well, then this would definitely be the bloodiest movie sequence in all of the MCU. Limbs are chopped off, throats are slit, and Thor himself is covered in golden blood by the end of the fight. This is a straight up slaughter, and if this scene wasn't so flashy or golden, it would easily be number 1 on this list. Peeling off at number 4, the High Evolutionary loses his face in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. After the Guardians absolutely destroy the High Evolutionary in a very one-sided fight, a piece of his skin is left flapping around on the top left-hand side of his face. Gamora then proceeds to peel the skin off of the High Evolutionary's face to reveal it to be a mask of his actual face, which was horribly disfigured by a younger Rocket. The disturbing nature of this man's face is honestly hard to look at, as he talks while missing his nose, eyelids, lips, and overall original skin all over his face. This is definitely one of the most graphic and disturbing reveals in the MCU and could easily borderline body horror. Upsetting all of us at number 3, Tony Stark's sacrifice in Avengers Endgame. After Iron Man delivers the ultimate justice to Thanos and his army by snapping them out of existence, the pure force of the combined magic of the Infinity Stones immediately start to kill Tony from the inside out. Even before Tony clicked and he was just combining the stones in his hands, we see them immediately destroy his arm. The highly enhanced Iron Man suit Tony is wearing allowed him to initially survive the snap, but unfortunately only for a few minutes. The snap immediately completely fried Tony's right arm and that side of his face as he sits down and begins to lose functions within his body. Tony can't speak or even blink as all his friends come to say their goodbyes. The graphic nature of Tony's wounds on display and the clear indication that the rest of his body looks the same underneath the suit really adds to the shocking sadness of this extremely hard to watch sequence. Shredding into number 2, a Hydra pilot gets shredded in Captain America: The First Avenger. When Captain America attempts to stop all the Hydra plane pilots, he jumps on a plane with 2 pilots as it takes off. Captain America attempts to get in the bomber as one pilot is flying it and the other pilot is fighting him on top of it. The pilot in control of the bomber attempts to fly the bomber straight up in the air and shred Captain America, but accidentally kills the other Hydra pilot instead. Although it is quick, this is an extremely bloody and graphic death, as it is shown in full display right in the front and center of the screen. They don't even try to hide anything about this kill with the camera angles or the editing. The blood even continues to fly off the propeller in the following shot. How they got away with this death, getting an M rating with today's standards, is honestly beyond me. And exploding onto number 1, Black Bolt's powers backfire in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. When Mr. Fantastic reveals to the Scarlet Witch that Black Bolt can destroy her with a whisper, she uses her reality-bending powers to completely disappear his mouth. Panicking and realizing he can't fill his mouth, Black Bolt lets out a small noise, which pushes his eyes out of their sockets for a split second. Blood sprays out of his nose, and he blows the back of his head out as he then falls to the ground dead. This is absolutely some crazy MCU body horror. Even if it's a very short death, this is still extremely graphic and hard to watch. Thank you for watching my list on the most violent MCU movie moments. Did you forget about any of these brutal kills, or did I miss a super important one? Either way, sound off in the comments below and let me know. So let's keep talking about it in the comments together. If you enjoy superhero content like this, a like would be super appreciated. And feel free to press the subscribe button to join my pop culture family here on YouTube. Thanks again, and I will see you all in the next video.